writers. I was looking through my notebook, and I actually snuck a peek at some of your notebooks, and do you know what I noticed? We have already, it's like the 36th day of school, and I could not believe how different our writing looks already. I've been sitting and reading some of our writing together at the computers, and then I looked at some of the writing from the beginning of the year in our notebooks. I'm amazed. So far this year, we've talked about how stories tend to go. I see that in our writing. We have talked about new ways to tell a story. We did some rearranging. This is not snack time, ladies. I saw some people starting stories earlier, stories later. They were telling stories out of order. I saw all of these strategies for all the narratives that we came up with. What I'm really impressed with is everybody that I've sat down with so far, I've asked, when did you think of this story idea? Do you remember what brainstorming day that was part of? Some people have told me it's an emotion. Some people have told me it's a turning point. Some people have told me it's a person. I can't believe it because I don't think that was happening in our first entry. So I can't believe it. I see Story Mountain. I see everybody, what are we doing? Raising the level of our narrative writing. I can't believe it. So there's dialogue, there's paragraphs. I'm very impressed. So I'm wondering if we remember, it was a little while ago now. Oh, I forgot I opened up another screen here so I don't have to go back and forth. I was wondering if anybody remembered, it was a little while ago, but there's a day where we used this checklist. And I think the first time, I do have extras if you weren't here that day or if for some reason it walked out of our notebook. But I feel like the first time I looked at this, it was pretty early in our narrative writing. I'll ask you to take them out in a moment, but not yet. It was pretty early in our narrative writing. So I'm not sure what half of these were saying or what was going on. Like a lead? What's a lead? How do I do the ending of my story? Or what do you mean by elaboration? But I feel like we have a pretty good idea about that now. So what I want to do is take some time to go through my story, and you are going to help me because, like always, I really need your help. You're going to help me take myself through this checklist with my story. So today I want to teach you that this checklist is a really, really great tool at any phase of your writing, at the beginning, at the middle, or as we're approaching the end. So I'm going to pull up my story here. You guys have been helping me with it throughout the past couple weeks now. So, let's see, that's a little too big. The last concert. And I think we'll see some evidence of all of our mini lessons in here as well. Before I start reading, I would like you to take out this checklist. If you don't have one, raise your hand. Go ahead and take it out. If you don't have one, raise your hand. I'm happy to see only a couple of hands up so far. Anybody else? Anybody? It's okay. Glad we're done.
I should have stayed home on focus. He said stay home on focus.
You know I cry, Lewis. I cry all day long.
Yeah?
If you weren't here, I'd just be so upset. Okay, class?
Yes.
Classity class.
Yes.
I love that I see about 50% of the class with listening faces. They have their materials out. They've got crisscross legs. Thank you for leading by example. So as we're reading through this, I'm going to keep these pieces in mind, but don't worry about reading through the checklist yet. We will come back to that at the end of my reading here. So the last concert. I put on my green choir robe one more time. It was just as big of an honor this time as it was the first. I gave it one last zip, found my spot in line, and walked to the risers. I was soaking in every last moment, every step, every creak of the riser, every glance into the audience. I thought nothing will be like this again. Just then, my neighbor grabbed my hand as if he knew I was letting this moment sink in. With that, everyone held hands to create one unified sound and one unified chorus. Like he always does, Mr. Powell looked out at us with a smile. He pointed to his heart, then to his head. We all thought, heart on fire, brain on ice, as he pointed. He was telling us not to think about the music anymore, just to feel it with your heart. He said this before every concert. The first few songs were a blur. I don't even remember what we sang, but I know we were perfect that night. Every note, every harmony, they all blended together and wrapped us tight in a warm blanket of music. As we approached the last song, I was starting to become emotional. I wondered, can I freeze time? Does this really have to be over? This was the end. This was really the end. I began to voice the lyrics through my teary eyes, my quivering chin, and the heavy sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. I could barely even see Mr. Powell, but trusted he was conducting us. I listened to the voices, and I'm noticing a couple typos, but that's okay because we can take care of that in our editing phase. I listened to the voices around me, and then I joined in singing, "Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you, away, you rolling river." These lyrics spoke to me, just like in the song. I knew I would long to see this group again, to hear this group again. I thought about the vast sea of green I was amongst. I thought about the blanket of sound that wrapped around me. Although I wanted to freeze time, I was bound away because it was time to move on. I remember the last time I sang with Vestal Voices. I was 18 years old, and it was my last year of high school. All my life I was a musician. I loved to play piano, and I loved to sing. I loved standing on the risers with the singers around me. I loved that the singers around me felt like family. I loved the heat of the stage lights. Standing there with Vestal Voices felt like home. I had been home for the past 3 years. What will home look like to me when Vestal Voices is over? I could see it now. Remember, here's our flash forward. I picture myself, and some of my happiness is gone. What used to be heart on fire, brain on ice, has become just ice. In this special group, I learned how to be a musician. I learned how to be part of something that was much bigger than myself. This feeling is something that carries with me even today. I may not be a music teacher, but Vestal Voices taught me music can be part of my life in any way that I choose. I'll never forget the things I learned in Vestal Voices. Did I double that? Oh, no. I was part of something much bigger than myself. I was one person who helped create something beautiful. Together we listened, we worked, we cried, we became angry, we learned. Although my time in Vestal Voices has come to an end, I know that my music life is not over for me. I may not be singing with this family anymore, but that doesn't mean I won't forget them. It is time for me to move on. It's time for me to make music my own, yet follow other passions. As soon as I stood on the risers for that last song, I thought to myself, I'm going to be okay. So I want to focus on just a couple pieces of this rubric. I want to start with the ending, because as I was reading that, I was like, what am I writing? What is going on? So I'm going to put this ending. Please flip to it's the back of the first page. Let's look through this ending piece on the rubric and see where I might fall on here. So, because these aren't final copies yet, we're still working. So let's see. This ending piece, I wrote an ending that connected to the main part of the story. The characters said, did, or realized something at the end that came from what happened in the story. Turn and talk about my ending. Am I not yet starting to, or yes? I know as I was reading, I was a little bit confused about what I was writing, but I want to hear your opinion. So I'm going to put the ending of my story back on the board. Turn and talk about my ending. Go ahead. It's when the mini lesson's over. some help with my ending. Be brutally honest with me. In the checklist, what did you and your I'm gonna pause. I need to pause. I'm pausing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you, carpet. 7, 8. Thank you very much. What if we didn't waste this time? What if? What could we do instead? So I need some help with this checklist. Where should I go? I'm going to look for at least 8 hands to be up before I call on somebody to help me out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Thank you. TJ, what are you thinking about the checklist and my ending? Starting to. So I'm wondering, on my checklist, what I'm going to do, thank you for the help there. On my checklist, I'm going to mark starting to, but I'm going to put a star here because I know that's something today that I really want to focus on. I could take myself through the rest of this, but I'll do that on my time. I don't want to steal your writing time. But when you get to your desks, don't write yet. Read. Sometimes you'd be surprised how you're writing, and you never go back to the beginning and read what you wrote. So before you start today, pause, read your story, and then take a look at your checklist. Is there something in there that you'd like to work on? I'd like us to pick 1, 2, or 3 things. So what's the least amount of things that you can choose from your checklist? What's the most amount of things you can pick? 3. Put a star next to it like I did. So if I come over and ask what you're working on, you'll be able to say, well, look here. I'm working on my ending because I'm only starting to connect it to the story. I've got some work to do still. So you can leave those checklists out as you go back to your desks. I'm excited to see everybody read their stories and read their checklist when they get going. Thank you to those of you who still have crisscross legs and listening faces. I'm a little worried about this Friday today, but I believe that we will be able to get some great work done. 1. I almost asked us to sit back down.